My name's Mike, and I'm 36. My wife, Sarah, is 34. We've been married for 9 years, and for the most part I thought we had a solid relationship. We met at a friend's barbecue, one of those easygoing events where laughter floats over burgers sizzling on the grill. Sarah was charming, quick-witted, and had this magnetic energy about her. I fell hard and fast. Our marriage started strong, but the past couple of years had been different. Sarah was always quick to anger, and her once playfully sarcastic remarks started to sting more often. She became secretive about her phone, which wasn't like her. First, I brushed it off as stress. She'd started a new job at a marketing firm, and I thought the pressure was getting to her. But then little things began to add up. She'd work late more often than seemed necessary, and the warmth between us began to cool. When I asked about her odd behavior, Sarah would brush me off or twist it into an argument. I didn't want to admit it at the time, but a part of me already knew something wasn't right. It started with a business trip Sarah took 2 months ago. She'd never been one for traveling without me. She always said it was more fun when we explored places together. But when her firm announced a weekend retreat in Denver, she seemed almost too excited to go. I chalked it up to her needing a break from the monotony. "Go have fun," I told her, kissing her goodbye at the airport. Her texts that weekend were off. Normally, she'd flood me with pictures of whatever city she was in, complete with captions like, "Look at this crazy menu," or "Wish you were here." But in Denver, all I got were sporadic, one-line messages, "Busy day, talk later," and "Can't chat now, so tired." The big shift happened when she came back. She had this shiny new necklace, a gold pendant with a little emerald at the center. I thought it was strange since she never wore jewelry that wasn't gifted by me or her mom. "Where'd you get that?" I asked casually. She hesitated for just a beat too long before replying, "Oh, a vendor was handing them out at the conference." I wanted to believe her, but my gut started to churn. Then, 2 weeks later, a package arrived at the house while Sarah was out. I wasn't in the habit of snooping, but the box had no return address, and curiosity got the better of me. I opened it and found an envelope marked, "For Sarah," in swirling cursive. Inside was a photo of her at dinner with a man I didn't recognize. The setting was intimate. Candlelight, wine glasses, her hand resting lightly on his. My heart started pounding. My first thought was that someone was trying to mess with us. Maybe a client at her firm had developed a weird fixation, but then I flipped the photo over. Scrawled on the back was, "Can't wait to see you again. Love, Matt." I sat there, staring at the picture, a cold pit forming in my stomach. Matt? I didn't know any Matt. What the hell was going on? And then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife a little deeper, Sarah walked in the door. "Hey, babe," she chirped, dropping her purse on the counter. I must have looked like I'd seen a ghost because her smile faltered immediately. "What's wrong?" My mind scrambled for an explanation that wouldn't give away what I just found. "Nothing," I managed. "Work stress." Sarah didn't buy it. Her eyes flicked to the box on the table. "What's that?" I forced a laugh.
No idea.
"You expecting something?" She looked at the package and froze. Just for a moment. "Oh, yeah, that's from a client." "Must be one hell of a client," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Her gaze narrowed, but instead of engaging, she grabbed the box and walked out of the room. My hands were shaking by the time I heard the bedroom door click shut. The next morning, the box and its contents were gone. Couldn't let it go. All day at work, my mind kept drifting back to the photo, the name Matt, and Sarah's strange reaction. I'd never been the kind of guy to doubt her before, but now the cracks in our marriage felt more like chasms. I needed answers. That night, while Sarah was in the shower, I decided to check her phone. I know it's a violation of trust, but at this point, I felt like mine had already been violated. Her phone was locked, of course, but I'd seen her type the code before. It wasn't exactly a state secret. When I opened her messages, my hands started shaking again. There was a thread with someone named M, buried near the bottom. Most of the messages had been deleted, but a few survived. M. Last weekend was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. Sarah. Me too. Can't wait for next time, Red Heart. My heart plummeted. Felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. But the real kicker came when I opened her photos. Tucked away in a hidden folder was a collection of selfies. Sarah, dressed to the nines, in what looked like a hotel room. In one of the photos, a man's arm was visible, draped casually around her shoulders. It was the same guy from the picture in the package. The shower shut off, and I barely had time to lock the phone and slide it back onto the nightstand before Sarah walked into the bedroom. She gave me a curious look, probably wondering why I was sitting there stiff as a board, but she didn't say anything. The next day, I called in sick to work. If Sarah was hiding something, I wanted to know what, and I had a feeling her late night at the office excuse would be an opportunity to find out. I parked my car a block away from her office and waited. Around 7 p.m., she came out of the building, but she wasn't alone. Matt was waiting for her by the curb, leaning casually against his car like a scene out of a damn rom-com. He pulled her into a hug, and then they got into his car together. I followed them, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. They drove to a fancy restaurant downtown. I parked across the street and watched as they walked inside, laughing and leaning into each other like a couple of love-struck teenagers. The betrayal hit me like a tidal wave, but I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I needed more. After an hour, they came back out. But instead of parting ways, they drove to a boutique hotel on the other side of town. When they disappeared through the entrance, I sat there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the neon sign blinking vacancy. I went home that night, but I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the night in my head, wondering how we'd gotten here, wondering how long I'd been the fool. The next morning, I was a wreck. I hadn't slept, and my nerves were shot, but I couldn't sit in silence anymore. I had to confront Sarah. She was in the kitchen, sipping coffee and scrolling on her phone like everything was normal. Watching her act so casual made my blood boil. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. Sarah, I started, leaning against the counter. We need to talk. She looked up at me, her expression unreadable. What about? About where you were last night, I said, my words deliberate. And don't tell me it was the office. Her face froze for a split second, but she recovered quickly, setting her mug down with a clink. What are you talking about? I was working late. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo I'd taken of her and Matt at the restaurant. So, who's this? I demanded, sliding it across the counter toward her. Her face drained of color. For the first time, she looked genuinely caught off guard. Where did you get that? That's not the point, I snapped. Who the hell is Matt? And why are you sneaking around with him? Sarah's expression shifted in an instant. Gone was the guilt, replaced by anger. Have you been spying on me? She shot back, deflecting like a pro. Going through my phone? Following me? God, Mike, how paranoid are you? Don't turn this around on me, I shouted, slamming my hand on the counter. You're the one lying, sneaking off to hotels and pretending you're working late. So don't you dare play the victim. She folded her arms, her mouth set in a tight line. Fine, you want the truth? Matt is a client. We've been seeing each other. It wasn't supposed to mean anything, but she trailed off, shrugging like it was no big deal. It just happened. It just happened? I repeated, my voice shaking with disbelief. You don't trip and fall into an affair, Sarah. How long has this been going on? Does it even matter? She said, rolling her eyes. Look, things between us haven't been great for a while. You're always busy with work. We barely connect anymore. Maybe if you'd paid more attention, I wouldn't have needed someone else. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. Needed someone else? I echoed. You think this is my fault? I'm not saying that, she said, her tone dripping with condescension. But relationships take effort, Mike. Maybe if you hadn't been so checked out. Stop. I cut her off, my voice cold. Don't try to justify what you did. You cheated. You lied. And now you're blaming me? Unbelievable. She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. Save it. I've heard enough. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, my mind racing. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same again. I spent the rest of the day in a haze. I couldn't go back to work. I was too angry, too raw. Instead, I sat in my car at the park down the street, replaying the confrontation in my mind. Every time I thought about Sarah's smug face and her deflection, my blood boiled all over again. By the time I got home, it was late. Sarah was in the living room, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. Seeing her so calm, so unaffected, made me want to scream. "Mike," she said, barely glancing up as I walked in. "We need to talk." I scoffed. "Now you want to talk?" "Yes," she said, putting her phone down and looking at me with forced seriousness. "I've been thinking, and maybe it's best if we take some space to figure things out." "Space?" I said, laughing bitterly. "Is that what you're calling it? You mean you want me out of the house so you can keep screwing Matt in peace?" Her jaw tightened, and she stood up, her arms crossed. "You're being ridiculous." "Am I?" I shot back. "You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around, and now you want space? Why don't you just admit you want to be with him?" She hesitated, and that pause said more than words ever could. I felt my stomach drop. "Mike, I'm not saying that," she said finally, her voice softening. "But I do think we've drifted apart, and maybe this isn't working anymore." I stared at her, feeling like I was staring at a stranger. "So, that's it," I said, my voice trembling. "You're giving up on us? After 9 years?" Her eyes flicked away, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flash of guilt. But then she sighed, shaking her head. "I'm not giving up. I'm just being realistic." "Realistic?" I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. "Right? Because cheating on your husband is so realistic." She didn't respond. Instead, she turned and walked into the bedroom, leaving me standing alone in the living room, my heart pounding. Couldn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Part of me wanted to fight for our marriage, to believe that we could somehow fix this. But the other part of me, the part that was screaming in rage and betrayal, wasn't sure there was anything left to fix. Around 3 a.m., I grabbed my phone and did something I never thought I'd do. I Googled how to file for divorce. The next day, I woke up groggy and more emotionally drained than I thought possible. Sarah had already left for work, or wherever she was going these days, and the house felt hollow without her presence. Despite everything, a part of me still wanted answers. How had this happened? Was there something I'd missed? As I sat there, staring at my coffee, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from an unknown number. Unknown. "Mike, I think you deserve to know the truth. Meet me at the Rusty Anchor at 7 p.m. A friend." I stared at the message, my pulse quickening. At first, I thought it might be a prank or some weird scam, but something about it felt genuine. And frankly, I was too desperate for clarity to ignore it. By 6:30 that evening, I was sitting in my car outside the Rusty Anchor, a dingy bar on the edge of town. My mind raced with questions. Who was this friend? Was it Matt? Or maybe someone from Sarah's office who'd seen something they couldn't unsee? At 7 sharp, a woman walked in. She was tall, brunette, mid-30s, with an air of confidence that suggested she didn't waste time on games. She glanced around the bar until her eyes landed on me. "You must be Mike," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "I'm Heather." "Okay. And who are you exactly?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She leaned in, her expression serious. "I'm Matt's wife." My jaw dropped. Couldn't have spoken if I'd tried. Heather gave a bitter laugh. "Yeah, shocking, right? Trust me, I didn't want to be here either. But when I found out about you, I figured you'd want to know the full story." "Wait," I said, still reeling. "So, how did you find me?" She shrugged. "Matt's not exactly discreet. I found your name in one of Sarah's texts. After that, it wasn't hard to piece things together." For the next hour, Heather filled in the gaps. Matt and Sarah had met at a networking event months ago and had been seeing each other ever since. Heather had suspected something was up when Matt started working late and hiding his phone. When she finally confronted him, he admitted to the affair but claimed it was just physical. "And you believed that?" I asked, incredulous. Heather's smile was cold. "Not for a second. Matt's a liar and I'm done with him. But I thought you deserved to know what you're dealing with." By the time I left the bar, my head was spinning. Not only was Sarah cheating on me, but her lover had been cheating on his wife too. It was like a twisted soap opera, and I was smack in the middle of it. But the night wasn't over yet. When I got home, Sarah's car was in the driveway, and the lights were on. I walked inside to find her sitting at the dining table, her face pale. "We need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. "Yeah," I said, crossing my arms. "We do." She hesitated, then blurted out, "Matt's wife called me." For a moment, the room was so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator. Sarah's words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to detonate. "She called you?" I repeated, my voice tight. Sarah nodded, her face pale but her expression defensive. "Yes, she called me this afternoon. She said she met with you." "And?" I prompted, my anger bubbling just beneath the surface. "What excuse did you give her?" "Let me guess. You tried to spin it like you were the victim." Her eyes flashed with irritation, but she didn't deny it. "I told her the truth, Mike. That things between us haven't been good for a long time and that Matt," she faltered, as if realizing there was no way to finish that sentence without digging herself deeper. "Look, I didn't expect her to involve you." "You didn't expect her to involve me?" I snapped, my voice rising. "Sarah, you were screwing her husband. What did you think was going to happen? That we'd all just go on living in ignorance while you played house with him on the side?" Her face twisted with frustration. "You don't understand. It wasn't like that. Matt and I, we connected. He listened to me. He made me feel." "Don't you dare finish that sentence," I interrupted, my voice cold. "You think I don't listen to you? That I don't care? What about me, Sarah? What about what you've done to this marriage?" She stood up abruptly, knocking her chair back. "You want to know the truth? Fine. I don't regret it, Mike. Not one bit. You've been so checked out for years. Work, your hobbies, everything comes before me. And yes, I found someone who actually paid attention to me. So, maybe if you'd been a better husband." "Oh, don't you dare try to blame this on me." I cut her off, my voice shaking with rage. "You made a choice, Sarah. You lied, you cheated, and now you're trying to rewrite history to justify it." She glared at me, her hands clenched into fists. "And what about you, huh? What's your part in this, Mike? Or are you just the perfect victim?" I laughed bitterly. My part? My part was trusting you. My part was believing we were in this together. And you took that trust and threw it in the trash. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the silence between us crackling with unspoken anger and pain. Then Sarah's shoulders sagged, and she sat back down. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, almost pleading. "Mike, I didn't mean for it to get this far. I don't even know what I want anymore." "Well, I know what I want," I said, my voice firm. "I want the truth. All of it. How long has this been going on? How many lies have you told me? Because I'm done playing this game, Sarah." She hesitated, then dropped her gaze to the table. "Since the Denver trip," she admitted. "And yes, I lied about a lot of things. But I never wanted to hurt you." I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my throat. Too late for that. Just then, my phone buzzed on the counter. I picked it up, expecting another message from Heather. Instead, it was a text from an unknown number. "Unknown. You should know there's more to Sarah's lies than you think. Call me." Attached was a picture of Sarah, this time with yet another man. I stared at the picture on my phone, my stomach twisting in knots. It was Sarah, unmistakably, sitting across from yet another man in what looked like a coffee shop. They weren't touching, but the way they leaned toward each other, the easy smiles on their faces. It wasn't the kind of interaction you'd expect between coworkers or friends. Who's this? I demanded, shoving the phone in Sarah's face. She flinched, her eyes widening as she looked at the screen. Where did you get that? She stammered. Not the point, I snapped. Who is he? She opened her mouth, then closed it, as if struggling to come up with a plausible lie. Finally, she sighed, her shoulders slumping. His name's Brian. He's a guy I met through work. A guy you met through work? I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. Let me guess. Just a friend? Mike. It's not what it looks like, she said, her tone defensive. Brian and I, there's nothing physical. We just talked. He was there for me when I felt like you weren't. I laughed, the sound harsh and humorless. So what? Matt wasn't enough? You needed a backup emotional affair on top of your physical one. Her face flushed with anger. That's not fair. You don't understand how lonely I've been. How neglected I've felt. Neglected, I shouted, throwing my hands up in frustration. Sarah, do you even hear yourself? You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around with not one but two other men, and now you're trying to make this about your feelings? What about me? What about the fact that I've been blindsided by all of this? I didn't want to hurt you, she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. I swear, Mike, I didn't. Then why didn't you stop? I asked, my voice breaking. Why didn't you come to me and tell me how you were feeling instead of destroying everything we've built? She didn't answer, and the silence felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I couldn't look at her anymore. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. Where are you going? She called after me. Out, I said without looking back. I ended up at a 24-hour diner, staring into a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. My mind raced with questions, doubts, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. Who even was Sarah anymore? The woman I'd married seemed like a stranger now, a shadow of the person I thought I knew. My phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. Unknown. Call me when you're ready to hear everything. You're not the only one she's been lying to. This time I didn't hesitate. I hit the call button, my heart pounding as the line connected. Hello? A man's voice answered. This is Mike, I said, my voice trembling. Who is this? My name's Brian, he said, and my blood ran cold. Yes, that Brian. The diner seemed to shrink around me as Brian spoke my name. My grip on the phone tightened, and I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. What the hell do you want? I asked, my voice low but trembling with anger. To set the record straight, Brian replied calmly. I know about you, Mike. I've known for a while, and I think it's time we both stop letting Sarah manipulate us. The nerve of this guy. I wanted to reach through the phone and throttle him, but I forced myself to stay calm. Manipulate us? I repeated. You're part of the problem, Brian. You're one of the men she's been cheating with. He sighed. I thought so too at first, but it's not that simple. Look, we were close, yes, but I didn't know about Matt. I didn't know there were others. And honestly, I didn't even know she was married until last week. That stopped me in my tracks. You didn't know she was married? I asked incredulously. No, Brian said, his voice tinged with bitterness. She told me she was separated, that you two were practically divorced. She made it sound like she was just waiting for the paperwork to go through. I sank back in my seat, my mind reeling. Sarah had lied to him, too? Somehow, that realization didn't bring me any comfort. It only added another layer to the tangled mess of deception. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I think you deserve to know the truth, Brian said. And because I've been burned by her lies, just like you. She used me, Mike. I thought we had something real, but now I see that I was just another piece in her game. I took a deep breath, trying to process everything. So what are you saying? That she's some kind of serial liar? More than that, Brian said grimly. She's dangerous. She twists the truth to fit her narrative, and she doesn't care who gets hurt in the process. I just thought you should know what you're dealing with. I didn't respond right away. My head was spinning with all the revelations, and I didn't know what to believe anymore. But one thing was clear. Sarah wasn't the person I thought she was. "Thanks for calling," I said finally, my voice hollow. I need time to figure out what to do." "Good luck, Mike," Brian said before hanging up. When I got home, Sarah was waiting for me in the living room. She looked up as I walked in, her expression a mix of worry and defiance. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "Talking to Brian," I said bluntly, watching her face for a reaction. Her eyes widened for a split second before narrowing. "What did he tell you?" "Enough," I said. "Enough to know that you've been lying to everyone, not just me." She stood up, crossing her arms defensively. "Brian's a liar. You can't believe anything he says." "Funny," I said with a bitter laugh. "That's exactly what he said about you." She flinched, and for the first time, I saw a crack in her armor. "Mike, save it," I snapped. "I'm done with the excuses, the justifications, the lies. I don't even know who you are anymore." "Mike, please," she said, stepping closer, her voice trembling. "We can fix this. I know I messed up, but I love you. Doesn't that count for something?" I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "Love isn't supposed to hurt like this, Sarah. And I can't keep pretending everything's okay when it's not." She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. "I'm filing for divorce," I said, my voice firm. "I can't do this anymore." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might actually feel remorse. But then she straightened, her eyes hardening. "Fine," she said coldly, "if that's what you want." And with that, she walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, shattered but resolute. The days following that confrontation were a blur. I contacted a lawyer and started the process of filing for divorce. Each step felt surreal, splitting up our finances, discussing who would take what. The house was the hardest. It wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was the life we had built together. But now, every room seemed tainted with memories I no longer wanted. Sarah moved out a week later. She didn't fight me on the house, which was unexpected. She left behind some things. Clothes, books, a few random items, but I didn't touch them. I couldn't bring myself to go through her things. I boxed them up and told her she could pick them up whenever she wanted. One evening, as I was packing away old photos, I came across our wedding album. I sat down with it, flipping through the pages, and for the first time, I let myself cry. Not just for the betrayal, but for the love we once had, the laughter, the dreams, the promises. It all felt so far away, like it had happened to someone else. Weeks turned into months. I blocked Sarah on everything, her number, social media, even her email. I needed space to heal, and every notification from her felt like a fresh wound. She tried reaching out a few times, sending messages that ranged from apologetic to downright manipulative. But I stayed strong. I'd made my decision, and there was no going back. During this time, I also heard from Heather again. She called to check in, not on behalf of Matt. She had left him too, but as someone who understood the chaos I was going through. Our conversations became a strange source of comfort. There was no romantic angle, no ulterior motive, just two people trying to make sense of the wreckage left behind by the same storm. One night, she said something that stuck with me. "Mike, you didn't fail." She did. "You gave her a chance to be part of something good, and she chose to destroy it. That's on her, not you." Hearing that felt like a turning point. I stopped replaying every argument, every sign I might have missed. I stopped blaming myself. Now, 6 months later, I'm in a better place. The divorce is finalized, and I've started going to therapy. It's helped me unpack the emotional weight of the betrayal, and it's given me tools to rebuild my life. I've reconnected with old friends, taken up hiking, and even adopted a dog. A goofy Labrador mix named Cooper who seems determined to keep me smiling. As for Sarah, I heard through mutual friends that things didn't work out with Matt. Or Brian. Apparently, she tried to reach out to one of them, but neither wanted anything to do with her after the truth came out. It's not schadenfreude exactly, but there's a certain closure in knowing that her lies eventually caught up to her. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, It's that betrayal doesn't have to define you. Can break you, yes, but it can also be the catalyst for growth. I've learned to set boundaries, to value myself, and to never settle for less than I deserve. To anyone reading this who's in a similar situation, trust your instincts. If something feels off, don't ignore it. And if someone shows you who they truly are, believe them the first time. You deserve better. We all do. Thank you for staying with me. This crazy journey is finally over and I'm ready for what's next. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more interesting stories. And leave a comment with what you would do in this situation. See you in the next videos.